right, welcome back, everybody. My name is Dr. Brian Carlson, and today this is the fourth and final video in our series about how to write in APA style. And this last video is all about kind of writing tips, tricks, strategies that will help your paper be even stronger. So one of the first things I want to briefly mention to you guys is it's really important to guide your reader throughout the entire purpose, um, uh, to guide your reader throughout the entire paper. So that way it seems really pulled together. I know it's tempting to just go in there and kind of wing it, but that might have worked for high school, but it's not going to work for college. Your college professors are going to see right through that. So the best way to get around that is to take a step back before you write and think about, well, what do I want to include here? I have all of these articles that I've read sitting in front of me. What order should I put them in? What claims are they supporting? Where's this gaps in the literature? Like, what don't I know? And that'll become really apparent to you when you create an outline. So in this outline, kind of think about paragraph by paragraph, even line by line, of what generally do I want the readers to know, and then where do I want them to go? Where do I want them to see this kind of progression of ideas going? So they can get a really good snapshot of the background of the field, where the gap in literature is, and what the next step is. Luckily, just about every research article has the same flow. And once you know about this flow, it'll help your own writing, and it'll also help you read other journal articles because you'll know exactly where to look in that first section, the introduction or literature review, to know exactly where they're going to include this information. It also, uh, it's also a cue to you, say, where should I be including this information in my papers as well? So what you might have heard already is that in your introduction sections and these literature reviews, you'll often see this upside down triangle, often called this kind of funnel approach to writing. And at the very beginning, what you'll want to do is start broad, introduce the problem, this kind of broad overview, something like people are prejudiced or there's police brutality going on in the streets. Like you might introduce like this big problem, right? People are prejudiced. And then below that, get a little bit more specific. Start describing the relevant background, the previous research being done on this topic. So you might talk about, yeah, like people are prejudiced. In fact, here are all the ways that discrimination plays out in school settings, in work settings, in police settings, and like all these different systems, just kind of proving this point that, yeah, prejudice is a problem, right? Prejudice exists, and here's the previous research on it. And then once you start getting more and more specific by describing this research, you might get to a point where it says, you know, like, but no one's looked at implicit racism, or no one's looked at how it affects hiring decisions to go into STEM fields or something like that. And what you've done is you'll eventually get to a point by narrowing it down by saying, you know what, but no one's ever asked this question right here. That's why I'm doing this study. So you introduce, like, to fill this gap in the literature, I'm proposing this study. To fill this gap in the literature, I'm going to examine the relationship between these variables and that and those variables. So that way it seems really clear of like, oh, why are you doing this? Oh, because I know there's a broad problem. Other people have done research, but no one's done this before. And that is the gap in the literature that you're trying to fill here. And at the very end, the very bottom of this funnel or upside down triangle is where you'll include your hypothesis. So given your study purpose and what you want to find, what is your specific prediction here? So this will help you outline your introduction sections. It'll also be a really useful trick whenever you're reading articles. You'll know exactly where to jump in the intro to find this really important information. So when you are presenting your ideas, it's important that you lay it out. So organization is key, and you want to present them in an orderly way. So when the flow gets choppy, it's like, man, like I want to kind of have a major shift in gears. Like I was talking a whole lot about like explicit prejudice and like blatant racism, and now I want to shift gears over here to like the subtle, indirect, implicit types of racism. And if you feel like you're having a hard time with that kind of flow between these big kind of choppy different subjects, that's when your subheadings are going to be really useful. And if you have more questions about subheadings, go back and check out that second video I made about, or excuse me, the first video I made about APA format. When you're introducing really nuanced points or things that seem really kind of complicated or proceeding in a stepwise fashion, don't make it overly complicated. Arrange them in a sequential fashion. Say like, the purpose of my research is threefold, right? There are three main reasons why this is bad, right? First, second, third. Using those phrases, first, second, third, makes it really clear. Okay, there's three things. They've hit 1, 2, 3. I see where they're going here. It's fine to use words like finally, in conclusion, in sum, to let them know, hey, like we're tying a bow on some things. I just introduced a bunch of things and now I'm going to pull it all together. Use these words not as space filler, but use them strategically to let the reader know that you're bringing ideas together. And another useful trick is use parallel structure to highlight similarities and differences. So when you're talking about research studies, you might be kind of comparing and contrasting. So like this study did this and they found that, whereas this study over here did this and they found that. By setting up those studies in a parallel fashion, it becomes really clear to the reader what was the same between them and what was different. So imagine a sentence like this. Freshmen wrote 500 words in the first 10 minutes. However, seniors wrote 1,000 words in the first 10 minutes. A nice way of saying like they're almost identical sentences, right? Except for the first one's talking about freshmen rather than seniors, and the first one's showing 500 words in the first 10 minutes rather than 1,000 words. So by kind of laying them out, kind of using the exact same sentence structure, it makes it really clear of how they're similar and how they're different between freshmen and seniors. It's fine to use this. It's not lazy writing. It's strategic. And I also wanted to include a bunch of phrases that help you transition. Because one thing that might be frustrating is when you get a paper back, it says things like choppy or flow or like, you know, like you need like a clear organization. I understand how you jump from here to there, like what's going on here. Or some professors will just write little question marks. What they're getting at is like, I'm not following. So the way that you can have this smoothness of expression is by using these transitions. And these transitions are fine to drop in your writing. It'd be a little weird if you talked using some of these transitions, but that's okay. So the first one I want to talk to you about is therefore. So therefore is a really great transition to follow. So I just introduced something. Therefore, here's the conclusion I want to make from that finding. They found this, therefore it's a problem, or it's an area for future research, something like that. The next phrase that I use all the time is indeed. You never talk to someone and be like, indeed, how are you doing? Like, it'd be a weird thing to say face to face, but indeed is a fantastic word to drop into your writing, because what it means is indeed, here's going to follow in the next sentence, a more specific example. Like, people are racist. Indeed, given scores on the implicit association test, people show an automatic preference for white rather than black faces. Like, indeed, here's a really specific research claim that's going to support the broader claim I made in the sentence before. So indeed is really useful in your writing. I encourage you to use it. Furthermore is a nice way of progressing the reader, saying, all right, we're moving on, but this next point I'm going to make is even more evidence for that previous claim that I just made. So I've said, you know, people are racist. Indeed, here's this finding. Furthermore, here's even more evidence to support that previous claim that I made. Another useful transition is however. However is setting up a contrast. Freud found this. However, other researchers cannot replicate it. What that's showing is like I'm gonna make a turn here in my writing, and I really want you to like grab the steering wheel and like hold on, right? That we're gonna be turning gears here. The next phrase, afterward, is really useful in your method section. It's showing this kind of flow over time. So first of all, you could use first participants did this, second they did this, third they did that. Or what you could say, at the beginning of the study, participants completed an informed consent form. Afterward, they began this portion of the survey. Afterward is just kind of guiding the reader of saying, hey, we're making some time progressions here on what participants did or what happened. Finally, and in conclusion, and sum is a nice way of kind of pulling it all together. Like finally, in the end, this is what we found. Or finally, at the conclusion of the study, participants were paid and debriefed. Moreover is another useful phrase that gets used in writing, in good writing all the time, but you would never say it face to face. That would be weird to be talking to someone. Like moreover, but what moreover is referring to is like, moreover, here is about to follow even more evidence that supports that previous point that I've made. And similarly is showing like the opposite of a contrast. So researchers over here found this effect with women. Similarly, in Papua New Guinea, they found the same effect with men, right? Just really want to show that even though these two studies that I'm going to be talking about seem different, I'm going to draw like a similar conclusion from both of them. And I want you to see how that's similar between the two. So even using these transition phrases are really great ways to help your reader follow along with you and get the same points that you're getting at. And while you're doing this, you want to be engaging. There's some writing that is so boring. I know it, you know it, you've read those papers, they suck, right? They really stink. What I would encourage you to do is not follow the example of those boring writers, and instead find articles that are really engaging, that you follow really easily. It's like, oh, I get what they're saying here. I get where they're moving this argument along, and borrow those strategies. What are they doing? How are they engaging in you, or engaging you as the reader? And some of those common things are like, they might use examples and stats. They're not going to drop them throughout their intro where it seems like you're reading like a math book. Instead, what they're going to drop is probably pretty early and use those statistics and specific examples to grab your attention. So it's like, oh, like I get why this is important. And then they're going to hit you with the research study and the limitations and how they need to do this next study to fill the gaps. Another useful trick to engage your reader is to mix up your sentence structure and length. So when you're writing, if all of your sentences are all really long or all really short or all medium length, it gets kind of monotone when you're reading it. So imagine this sentence or this short paragraph. People have a need to form close relationships. They seek out relationships with other people when they are lonely. People with an insufficient number of friends have low self-esteem. It's like, I get what you're saying here, but all those sentences are kind of blah. If we just shake up the sentence structure and length, go short, medium, long, now check out about how easily this paragraph flows. People need to belong. They are motivated to form close relationships with others. If people cannot form a minimal number of relationships, they often experience low self-esteem. So now notice how that's just more engaging, and you included the exact same information. The only difference is in the first one, you had blah, 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 the exact same sentence structure and length. If you mix it up a little bit, it's going to keep your readers more engaged in that process. So that's it. If you have any other questions about writing, remember APU has a ton of resources out there, including the Writing Center, and I'm sure your faculty member would be happy to chat with you about writing and make sure that you're developing.